Did you realize that the first book of a fantasy series can make or break your entire reading experience? Join me today to discover some of the best fantasy books that are only the beginning. Welcome to Fantasy for the Ages, the show where a father and son talk about fantasy, science fiction, and other nerdy things we enjoy. Today, just Jim, the father, here with you, coming at you to introduce a whole mess of books and series to you that you may not have come upon yet. I'm going to make your life a little better today. Here at Fantasy for the Ages, we occasionally host a tournament on the social media formerly known as Twitter to give people the chance to vote over a variety of great books, ranging on a whole bunch of different topics. This month, the challenge was for people to submit a slate of 3 books which they believe are the best books to start a fantasy series. 3 different series submitted from each person. Now, some of these I'd never heard of. And that's key to why I'm doing an episode like this for you, because I bet some of them you haven't heard of either. When I come upon great book recommendations, they go on my TBR, my to be read list. This is how that sucker has gotten almost 1,500 books long. It's my to be wish someday I'll read list, but it is where I go to when I'm picking a new book. So today I'm sharing the books that were put forward for this month's tournament. And I'm breaking them down into 3 categories for you. Books and series that I've never heard of. That's what I'll talk about first, alphabetically, introduce them very quick. Then secondly, books and series that I have heard of, but I haven't got around to reading yet. Most of these were already sitting on my TBR, but if I'd missed a couple, now they are. And finally, I'll have a little fun with the books that I have already read, series that I've already consumed, because I'm going to rank those. I'm going to put them in the order of which ones I think are the best. Now, I'm not voting in the tournament. You can still go find us if you're watching this the day it drops. Find our X account and get in on the voting. You can have an influence on which one ends up winning the best 3 fantasy books to start a series. But I'm going to rank the ones I've read based on which ones I think were the best for starting a series. Not necessarily the best books, the best for starting a series. Now, again, as many of these books you also haven't read, I'll give you only the barest bones about them. I'm not going to spoil anything. I'll just give you like a 1-sentence synopsis of each book. I'll share its author, when the book was published. I'll give you its ratings on Goodreads and Amazon. Just, hey, what does the masses think? And then you've got a little taste as to whether or not you want to try these fantasy books and maybe put them on your TBR. So let's get into this. The first category I'm introducing, I've got 11 books that I'd never heard of until they were submitted for this tournament. Alphabetically, let's see what we got. First off, An Adventure Brewing. This is book 1 of the Beers and Beards trilogy by Jolly Jupiter, published in 2023. It's cozy fantasy lit RPG. I've never read any cozy fantasy yet. So, hey, okay, it's on my TBR, along with a few others. Goodreads rating of 4.4 out of just 615 ratings, and Amazon 4.7 out of just 629. The story follows Pete, a man who finds himself in a fantasy world inhabiting the body of a dwarf, as he endeavors to revolutionize dwarvish brewing by introducing new and better beers. See? Gripping plot. Cozy. Second up, Alana, The First Adventure. This is from the Song of the Lioness Quartet by Tamara Pierce, published way back in 1983. This is young adult fantasy. Goodreads rating of 4.2 out of over 133,000 raters, and Amazon 4.7 out of 3,900. In a realm where girls are forbidden from becoming knights, young Alana disguises herself as a boy to pursue her dream of knighthood, embarking on a journey filled with challenges, magic, and self-discovery. Might be worth checking out. Next up, How Black the Sky. The first book of the Heroes Medal trilogy by T.J. Marquis, published in 2020. This is dark fantasy with a Goodreads rating of 4.5 out of 8 ratings, and Amazon 4.7 out of 16. So this has not gotten much exposure at all. You kind of have to take that into account then as to whether it's really as good as the ratings are, but it could be. The synopsis: in a world where a deep red sun crawls across a black sky, a young spellsword joins legendary warriors to confront an imminent invasion from the Underlands, uncovering secrets that challenge their understanding of the looming threat. Then we've got In Darkness Cast, Shades of Black Duology. Okay, just 2 books. This is by Jonathan Scherger and was published in 2020. This is dark fantasy of a sword and sorcery ilk. Goodreads rating of 4.3 out of just 37 ratings, and Amazon 4.6 out of 108. In a world besieged by demonic forces, a young warrior's desperate plea for guidance leads him to a cynical sorcerer from another realm, offering a perilous path to heroism. Then we've got Mark of the Fool, the first book of the 9-book series, also called Mark of the Fool, all by J.M. Clark. First book came out in 2022, so these are coming out pretty fast and furious. This is progression fantasy. None of these books are particularly long. Goodreads rating of 4.3 out of 6,500 votes, and Amazon 4.7 out of 4,700 ratings. The story follows Alex Roth, who, after being marked as the Fool, the least respected of his kingdom's chosen heroes, he defies destiny by fleeing to a university of wizardry to uncover the truth about his land's evil and to exploit his mark for new paths of power. Then we have, and this one just sounds delightful, Miss Percy's Pocket Guide to the Care and Feeding of British Dragons. This is a Miss Percy Guide trilogy by Quenby Olson. First book came out in 2021. Cozy fantasy. So I got more to put on my TBR in this niche of fantasy. Goodreads rating of 4.1 out of 3,100 votes. A little over that, of course. And Amazon 4.5 out of over 2,300 votes. Miss Mildred Percy, a 40-year-old spinster. How does 40-year-old become a spinster? This is messed up. Anyways, she unexpectedly inherits a dragon egg, leading her on an adventure filled with magic, self-discovery, and the possibility of romance. Maybe her spinster days are coming to an end. Then we've got something very different. My Heart is a Chainsaw. This is the first book of the Indian Lake trilogy written by Stephen Graham Jones, published in 2021. It is fantasy adjacent, because this is horror. Goodreads rating of 3.5 out of over 43,000 ratings, and Amazon 4.0 out of nearly 3,000 ratings. The novel follows Jade Daniels, a high school senior and avid slasher film enthusiast, which I am, who becomes convinced that a real-life slasher is unfolding in her small town of Proof Rock, Idaho. Okay, this went high on my TBR because that piqued my interest. Then we've got Paternus, Rise of the Gods, first book of the Paternus trilogy by Dirk Ashton, came out in 2016. This is urban fantasy. I love me some good urban fantasy. Goodreads rating of 4.0 out of over 2,900 votes, and Amazon 4.3 out of 1,200 votes. When a hospital is attacked by otherworldly beings, Fiona Patterson and Zeke Prisco are thrust into a hidden world where ancient gods and monsters are real, leading them on a perilous journey to uncover their own destinies, all in the midst of an age-old war. Then we've got Senlin Ascends. This is from the Books of Babel Quartet, written by Josiah Bancroft. It was published twice. It was first published in 2013, self-publishing, but then was picked up by Orbit, and they published it again with all their fancy branding in 2018. This falls into the science fiction fantasy category. Goodreads rating of 4.1 out of 31, over 31,000 ratings, and Amazon a 4.4 out of over 4,400 ratings. The novel follows Thomas Senlin of Senlin Ascends, a mild-mannered headmaster who embarks on a perilous journey through the enigmatic Tower of Babel to find his missing wife, Marva. I can't read my writing. Marva. Again, I haven't heard of this before, so you can't get all over me if I get some names messed up. But something else on my TBR. Then we've got a classic, Shape Changers, book one of the Chronicles of the Chesuli, an 8-book series by Jennifer Roberson, published back in 1984. This is high fantasy. Goodreads rating of just 3.9. I mean, that's still above average, but lower than most of the books on this list. And that's out of almost 4,000 ratings. Amazon rating of 4.5 out of 253. Now, this happens with some of the older classic fantasy where people weren't rating back then. Amazon did not exist in 1984 like we have out here now. So, you got to keep that in mind. In a realm where the magical Chesuli people are persecuted, a young woman discovers her heritage and must embrace her destiny amid ancient prophecies and political turmoil. And one last book in this category that I'd not heard of at all, The World Maker Parable, which is the first book of the Adjacent Monsters series, which only has 2 books so far, but I think it's still being written. This is by Luke Tarjan and came out in 2020. It's dark fantasy with a Goodreads rating of 4.1 out of just 79 ratings and an Amazon rating of 4.5 out of just 13. So again, not a lot of exposure for this, but somebody thought it was one of the best out there for starting off a series, so it's in our competition. It's only a novella, so a short read, and it explores themes of guilt and redemption through the intertwined journeys of Rona, a woman burdened with executing her beloved for treason. Yeah, dark fantasy is right. And Varesh Lumtale, a man haunted by his past and seeking redemption. All right, then we move on to category 2, the books I definitely heard of. And again, most of them were already on my TBR, but I have not read them yet. I've got 15 more books to share, and I think you'll have heard of some of these too. Maybe you've read some of these already. First up, we've got The Black Company. These are alphabetical again by name, and remember, you don't count the or when you're alphabetizing book titles. So, The Black Company, which is the first book of the 9-book series, The Chronicles of the Black Company by Glenn Cook. Theoretically, there's supposed to be 2 more books to come in this series, but I don't think we're ever going to see them. They each kind of tell their own story. The first one, The Black Company, came out in 1984. It's dark fantasy and also that military fantasy style. Goodreads score of 3.9 out of over 51,000 ratings. And for a book way back when, to still have that many ratings says it's got some staying power. Amazon, 4.4 out of just 1,400 ratings. The Black Company, an elite mercenary unit, navigates a world of shifting alliances and dark magic as they serve a mysterious and powerful sorceress known as the Lady. I've had this on my TBR for quite a while. I will get to it. Then we've got The Darkness That Comes Before. This is the first book of the Prince of Nothing trilogy by R. Scott Bakker, which came out in 2003. It's grimdark fantasy. I do enjoy good grimdark. Goodreads rating of 3.8 out of over 22,000 ratings, and an Amazon score of 4.3 out of just 2,100. In a world of political intrigue, ancient prophecies, and looming apocalyptic threats, that all sounds good. Disparate characters, a warrior philosopher, a mysterious sorcerer, and a cunning spy navigate a complex web of alliances and manipulations as the shadow of an ancient evil arises. Yeah, that sounds good. Then there's The Dragonbone Chair, book 1 of the Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn trilogy. This is really high on my TBR. I will be reading this soon. It's by Tad Williams. I feel bad I haven't read it already. This came out in 1988 and is totally epic fantasy with a Goodreads rating of 3.9 out of over 73,000 ratings and Amazon 4.5 out of 5,700 ratings. A humble kitchen boy becomes embroiled in a struggle for survival and power as an ancient evil stirs and threatens a fractured kingdom. Then we have Drosselmeyer, Curse of the Rat King, book one of the Nutcracker trilogy by Paul Thompson, which came out in 2021. This is just a nice fantasy novel with a Goodreads rating of 4.1 out of just 38 ratings and an Amazon score of 4.7 out of just 62. So even though it's been around for 3 years, it has not gotten much exposure yet. But I keep hearing from people that it's quite good, so it is on my TBR. In this action-packed prequel to The Nutcracker, young Fritz escapes an orphanage to become an apprentice in a powerful wizard consortium, uncovering a decade-old murder mystery that threatens his life and those he holds dear. Next up, and again, alphabetical, you can kind of get a feel for how far I'm going here. This is Fairy God Murder, the first book of the Fractured Fae series, which only has 2 books so far, but is still being written. The series is by Sarah J. Silver. This one came out in 2022 and is urban fantasy. Goodreads score of 4.3 out of just 48 ratings and an Amazon score of 4.6 out of just 39. More people need some eyes on this book, apparently. The novel follows Gwendolyn Evanshine, a fairy godmother who, after the brutal murder of her first princess, abandons her duties to hunt down the serial killer responsible. That's kind of dark, man. Not just urban fantasy, dark urban fantasy. Then we've got Fated. This is the first of 12 books in the Alex Verus series, and it is still being written, so 12 books so far, all by Benedict Jacka. The first book came out in 2012. It is urban fantasy, has been on my TBR for quite some time. If you like the Dresden Files, I hear the Alex Verus series is right in your lane. Goodreads score of 3.9 out of over 29,000 votes, and Amazon a 4.3 out of over 1,800 ratings. In modern-day London, diviner Alex Verus, who can foresee possible futures, is drawn into a dangerous conflict between light and dark mages over a powerful magical artifact. Nice thing about that one, you read it, you enjoy it, you already got 11 books waiting for you to plow through. Then we've got The Hellborn King. This is the first book of the Hellborn King saga. There's only 2 books so far. They're written by Christopher G. Brenning, and the first one came out in 2021. This is epic fantasy with a Goodreads rating of 4.1 out of just 118 ratings and an Amazon rating of 4.2 out of just 102 ratings. The novel follows Damien Dreadfire, who leads a coalition of unlikely allies against the kingdom of Batanthia, while Crown Prince Gareth Bethard contends with internal strife and external threats to his realm. Next, we've got Jade City. This is the first book of the Green Bones saga, which has 3 books. Written by Fonda Lee, the first book here came out in 2017. Again, urban fantasy. I'm happy to see a lot of urban fantasy making this list. A Goodreads score for Jade City of 4.0 out of over 79,000 ratings, and Amazon 4.4 out of over 9,200. The novel follows the Call family, leaders of the No Peak clan, as they navigate power struggles, honor, and magic in the city of Janloon, where Jade grants extraordinary abilities. Zach has read this. He loved this saga, so it's also fairly high on my TBR. Then we've got something else Zach has enjoyed, The Lies of Loch Lamora, the first book of the Gentleman Bastard sequence, which only has 3 books so far, but more are intended. We even have names for more books to come. These are written by Scott Lynch. The first book came out in 2006 and is considered high fantasy. Goodreads score of 4.3 out of over 310,000 ratings, so quite popular. Amazon 4.5 out of over 26,000 ratings. In the city of Camor, master thief Loch Lamora and his band of con artists The gentlemen bastards navigate a treacherous underworld of crime and deception, executing elaborate heists while facing unforeseen dangers. Yeah, I like what Zach said about these books. We do have review episodes by Zach on our channel about these, but I just say go ahead and put them on the TBR if you haven't read them yet. Then we've got A Little Hatred, the Age of Madness trilogy, book 1. But this is also book 7 of the books in Joe Abercrombie's First Law world, and I'm on book 6 right now, so I will be getting to this book quite soon. A Little Hatred was written in 2019. It is grimdark fantasy, very, very grimdark fantasy. It's got a Goodreads rating of 4.3 out of over 48,000 ratings and an Amazon score of 4.6 out of over 13,000. The novel follows a new generation of characters navigating political intrigue and societal upheaval during an industrial revolution in the world of the First Law. Yeah, those are going to be good. Then we've got The Many-Colored Land. This is from the saga of the Pliocene Exile Quartet. That means 4. All by Julian May. The first book came out in 1981. Science fiction fantasy, and from quite a while back. Goodreads rating of 4.1 out of over 10,000 votes, and Amazon a 4.4 out of 500, a little over 500 ratings. In a future where a one-way time portal to Earth's distant past exists, a diverse group of misfits and adventurers escape modern society to find themselves entangled in the complex politics and conflicts of an ancient alien civilization. Nice little blend of science fiction with fantasy, and that sounds good. It's already on my TBR. Then we've got Terms of Enlistment, the first book of the Frontlines series, which is an 8-book series by Marco Cluse. Terms of Enlistment was published in 2013 and is military science fiction, which, is kind of adjacent to fantasy. Goodreads score a 4.0 out of over 31,000 ratings and an Amazon of 4.4 over 9,900 ratings. In a dystopian future, Andrew Grayson escapes the slums by enlisting in the military, only to confront the harsh realities of interstellar warfare and political intrigue. Yeah, that doesn't sound a lot like fantasy, but science fiction is fantastical. I let people submit what they want in the tournament. Still sounds good. Next book is The Warded Man. I'm to W's, guys. I'm getting near the end of this section. This is the first book of the Demon Cycle, which has 5 books, all written by Peter V. Brett. Book 1 came out in 2008 and is post-apocalyptic fantasy. It's the first time I've said something like that on here. I like me some apocalyptic literature and post-apocalyptic, This is a Goodreads score of 4.2 out of over 126,000 ratings, and Amazon 4.5 out of over 6,600. In a world terrorized by nocturnal demons. Okay, I'm hooked there. Let me put this one down. No, this was already on my TBR. Humanity's survival hinges on rediscovering lost magic as a young man seeks to challenge the fear that keeps them cowering behind warded walls. Yeah, it'll be good. Then we've got We Are the Dead. This is the first book of the Last War trilogy by Mike Shackle. It came out in 2019 and is grimdark fantasy. A Goodreads score of 4.1 out of over 2,600 ratings, and an Amazon score of 4.3 out of over 1,150 scores. The novel follows the people of Jaya, who, after their land is conquered by the brutal Egriel, they don't sound nice, Egriel, they must find the courage to resist and reclaim their freedom. Then we've got the last book in this category, and it's a good one, The Will of the Many. The first and only book so far of the Hierarchy series. So I'm like, all right, you're taking a shot here, putting this in the tournament. I want the best start of a series, and you gave me book 1 when there's nothing else. James Islington, the author, has assured us more is to come. So, okay, I'll take it. This came out in just 2023. Hasn't been out that long. It's epic fantasy. A Goodreads score of 4.6, so one of the higher scores we've seen out of nearly 66,000 ratings. And Amazon 4.7 out of over 1,200. The story follows Vis Telemus, an orphaned fugitive who infiltrates the elite Katanan Academy to uncover secrets that could destabilize the oppressive hierarchy ruling his world. I know a lot of people who already read this and raved about it. It's been on my TBR ever since it came out. Oh, that's a lot. Whew. Let's get to the fun stuff now, though. The category 3 books, 18 books that I've already read, and I'm going from bottom to top, my preference. Feel free to argue in the comments. Now, while considering this is a good time to mention, leave us a like. Please subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet. I keep acts of love, man, bringing this stuff out to you. And if you hit that little notification bell, you'll know each time we send something new out, which happens almost every day, but not quite. Number 18 might get me some hate mail. The Shadow of the Torturer, the first book of the Book of the New Sun Quartet, and there is a sequel, 5th book as well. It came out a little bit later. These are all by Gene Wolfe. The first book was published back in 1980 and is science fantasy. I did not like it. I'm sorry, Drew McCaffrey. I know you love this book, and he submitted it here for the tournament. And you've got fans for this book, but it's just not my thing. That's why it's the bottom of what I'm putting on here. Goodreads rating of 3.8. So one of the lower ratings here. I'm not alone in having issues with the book. That's out of over 31,000 votes. And Amazon 4.0 out of 900 and some votes. The novel follows Severian, an apprentice in the Guild of Torturers, who is exiled for showing mercy and embarks on a journey throughout a distant future Earth. I'll give you this, the book is high quality in its writing. I just didn't enjoy the story. Then we get to number 17, which is another one lots of people love, and I just struggled to get into it and didn't thoroughly enjoy myself. This is Dragon Wing, the first book of the 7-book Deathgate cycle by Margaret Weiss and Tracy Hickman. I love their Dragonlance stuff. I didn't really get into the Deathgate cycle. This first book came out in 1990 and is high fantasy. It's got a Goodreads score of 3.9, so again, a little lower than some of the other great books we've been seeing, but 3.9 is still better than average. That's out of nearly 29,000 ratings. Amazon, though, much higher, 4.5 out of nearly 1,600. In a world divided into 4 elemental realms, a diverse group of characters embarks on a journey filled with magic and political intrigue, uncovering secrets that could alter their world's destiny. Now again, 7-book cycle. It's a big, broad story that you really got to read all 7 to fully appreciate. But Dragon Wing, if you like it, you're going to be in for a fun ride. Number 16, The Poppy War, the first book of the Poppy War trilogy by R.F. Kuang. This came out in 2018 and is grimdark fantasy. Goodreads score 4.1 out of over 315,000 ratings, and Amazon 4.3 out of over 5,000. In a world inspired by 20th century China, a war orphan's pursuit of power and vengeance leads her into the heart of a brutal conflict where she discovers shamanic abilities that could save her people or destroy them. This was a very different approach to grimdark. I've got content on these books out here on the channel. Check them out. I would recommend this to anybody. It's a different spin. Number 15, The 5th Season, the Broken Earth trilogy, book 1 by N.K. Jemisin. This came out in 2015 and won the Hugo Award that year. This is science fantasy with a Goodreads rating of 4.3 out of over 290,000 ratings, and an Amazon score of 4.5 out of over 7,000 ratings. In a world plagued by constant seismic activity, a woman embarks on a perilous journey to find her missing daughter amid societal collapse and devastating natural disasters. This book is unlike anything else I've written. It's unlike anything I've written because I haven't written anything. This is unlike anything else I've read. It has uniqueness on its side, and it's worth a look. Number 14, The Gunslinger, The first book of the Dark Tower series, which is 7 books plus a novella and a short story, all by Stephen King. The Gunslinger came out in 1982. The entire series takes a few decades for him to finish. This is dark fantasy with a Western tilt to it. I mean, come on, The Gunslinger. Goodreads rating of 3.9 out of over 629,000 ratings. So again, we're in the threes here, 3.9. Stephen King is a love him or hate him kind of writer. So Amazon, 4.3. A little stronger, but just out of a little over 32,000 ratings. In The Gunslinger, we've got a mysterious gunslinger embarking on a relentless quest across a desolate, dreamlike world to find the enigmatic Man in Black and uncover the secrets of the Dark Tower. It's a good start to a fantastic series. Number 13, for me, Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone, the first book of the 7-book Harry Potter series by J.K. Rowling. This came out in 1997 in the United Kingdom, then 1998 in the United States. This is fantasy of the middle grade variety. There was no young adult category yet. Basically, this created young adult. And it's interesting because this first book really reads more like middle grade fantasy, but as the kids age over the years these books come out, so does the level of the writing. And it gets grittier and darker as you go. Goodreads score 4.4 out of over 10.5 million ratings. Nothing has touched anything like this up to this point. You've got a whole bunch of you fantasy readers out there grew up on Harry Potter, and this is a very nostalgic one for you. I read this to Zach as a kid, to both our kids. We read them as a family. They were fun. I do love me some Harry Potter. Amazon rating of 4.8, again, out of 5. And that's out of 138,000 plus votes. The novel introduces us, of course, to the young Harry Potter, who discovers on his 11th birthday that he is a wizard. You're a wizard, Harry. And begins his education at Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. Number 12, for me, The Sword of Shannara. This is the first book of the Shannara trilogy, but also the start of a series that will stretch for well over 30 books, all written by Terry Brooks. This is epic fantasy of a very classic and enjoyable style. Goodreads rating of just 3.8. I think that's low. Out of a little over 108,000 votes. I'm much happier with Amazon's score of 4.4 out of 5,700. But I will say, this is a significant start to a trilogy and a series, but it is one of the weaker books in the series. You got to dig a little deeper to enjoy it. Have I rated it too high? It's subjective, but I love Shannara. The novel, this one, follows Shay Omsford, a young half-elf who embarks on a perilous quest to wield the legendary Sword of Shannara against the malevolent Warlock Lord threatening the Four Lands. Number 11, more recent book, much meatier, Malice, the first book of The Faithful and the Fallen, a 4-book series by John Gwynne. This was published in 2012 and is epic fantasy. It has a Goodreads rating of 4.1 out of over 45,000 votes, and Amazon 4.5 out of over 9,100. In a land on the brink of war, ancient prophecies foretell a clash between good and evil, where unlikely heroes must rise to face their destinies and the looming darkness. This could have been higher. I really enjoy this series, but I really struggled getting into this first book. There was so much to it, and I was doing it as an audiobook. I have an episode where I talk about that. It's deep, it's dense. You're better off physically reading this one than listening. That was my experience. Once I got into it far enough, loved it, loved it, loved it. Okay, here's our top 10 now. My top 10 starts with Mistborn, The Final Empire, the first book of the Mistborn saga, which is book 1 of a trilogy, but also the first book of a 7-book series with more coming. All of these, of course, by Brandon Sanderson. This was written in 2006 and is epic fantasy, with a Goodreads rating of 4.4 out of over 400,000 ratings, and an Amazon score of 4.7 out of over 43,000. In a world oppressed by a tyrannical, immortal ruler, a young street urchin discovers her latent magical abilities and joins a daring rebellion to overthrow the empire. Mistborn. I've read it twice. It was even better the second time. Number 9, The Name of the Wind. This is the first book of the Kingkiller Chronicle, which has 2 books so far, plus 2 novellas. And there's one more. Finished the series promise that we don't know if we'll ever get. That's the ding on this one, because the book is fantastic. It's by Patrick Rothfuss. Came out in 2007. It's heroic fantasy. A lot of great tropes on display. Goodreads rating of 4.5 out of 1,003,000 plus. That's a lot of love for this book. And an Amazon score of 4.7 out of over 83,000 ratings. In a world where magic and music intertwine, a legendary figure recounts his journey from a gifted child to a notorious figure of myth and reality. It's fascinating. I held off on reading this because I want the rest of the story. Well, now I'm like everybody else. I've read everything that came out and I'm stuck waiting for the end. But it's that good, you ought to just read it anyway. Number 8, The Way of Kings. The first book of the Stormlight Archive, which has 4 books for like a week more. The 5th book comes out next week. This is by Brandon Sanderson. It will eventually have 10 books, if I've listened correctly. The first book came out in 2010 and is very epic fantasy. Goodreads rating of 4.6 out of over 548,000 votes, and Amazon 4.8 out of over 73,000 ratings. In a storm-ravaged world, a soldier turned slave, a troubled nobleman, and a young scholar's paths converge as they uncover ancient secrets that could reshape their society's fate. Just to call out here, this is part of Brandon Sanderson's collective Cosmere works, as is Mistborn that I mentioned earlier. But this is like the opus of his works, the Stormlight Archive. If you read all the Cosmere books, then these are even better than if you just read the Stormlight Archive, but you can just read the Stormlight Archive. Number 7, Gardens of the Moon, the first book of Malazan Book of the Fallen, which is a 10-book series. Written by Stephen Erickson, the first one coming out in 1999. It is epic fantasy, again, on an absolutely epic scale. It has a Goodreads rating of 3.9 out of over 125,000 ratings, and an Amazon score of 4.4 out of over 14,000 ratings. Why so low on Goodreads? Gardens of the Moon is a tough book to get through. It's amazing, but you lack context when you read it. So some people give up. Some people write it off as not very good. The further you get into the series, the more you realize how incredible Gardens of the Moon is. I have, of course, read all 10 books. Gardens of the Moon is pretty impressive. In a world of high magic and political intrigue, the Malazan Empire's campaign to conquer the free city of Darujhistan intertwines the fates of soldiers, mages, assassins, and gods. A one-sentence summary does that so much wrong. There's just so much more to it. It's worthy of its 7th spot. Is it really behind 6 other books in quality? Well, not really. But for the start of a series, I'm probably reaching to put it up all the way at 7. Because again, it's kind of gatekeepy. A lot of people can't make it through it. But no problem getting through number 6 on the list, Stormfront, the first book of the Dresden Files, which has 17 books and counting, plus numerous novellas and short stories. The series by Jim Butcher. Stormfront came out in the year 2000 and is urban fantasy with a lot of mystery blended in. Goodreads rating of 3.9 out of over 361,000 ratings, and an Amazon score of 4.4 out of over 30,000 ratings. In modern-day Chicago, wizard and private investigator Harry Dresden is hired to solve a series of supernatural murders, leading him into a dangerous confrontation with dark forces. The Dresden Files is one of my favorite series of all time, and Stormfront is where it all begins. Number 5, The Blade Itself. First book of the First Law trilogy, but also the beginning of a full 9-book series of First Law. This is written by Joe Abercrombie, and this first book came out in 2006. And does it start with a bang? This is grimdark fantasy and some of the best I've read. Goodreads score 4.2 out of 266,000 plus ratings, and an Amazon score 4.4 out of over 24,000 ratings. In a land on the brink of war, a barbarian warrior, a crippled torturer, and a self-absorbed nobleman find their fates intertwined as dark forces threaten the realm. It was such a good ride. And again, I'm still reading First Law books now, but I got the first trilogy done. That's sweet. Number 4, massive throwback. The Fellowship of the Ring. First book of the Lord of the Rings trilogy by J.R.R. Tolkien, which came out all the way back in 1954. This is high fantasy with a Goodreads rating of 4.4 out of nearly 2.9 million ratings. This book's important to people. Amazon score 4.7 out of almost 70,000. No, a little over 70,000 ratings. The novel, come on, you know what it's about. How can I describe it in one sentence? We follow Frodo Baggins, a hobbit who embarks on a perilous journey to destroy a powerful ring and thwart the Dark Lord Sauron's plans for domination. Yeah, there's so much more, but you probably know it already. Number 4 on my list. Number 3, though, one of the surprises of my more recent reading, Heroes Die. First book of the Acts of Cain Quartet. Again, 4 books. By Matthew Woodring Stover. This came out in 1998, is science fantasy, and really should be mentioned by more people. It's got a Goodreads score of 4.3 out of over 10,000 ratings and an Amazon score of 4.5 out of over 1,400 people. It's got good scores from those who've read it. In a dystopian future, professional assassin Harry Michelson, known as Cain, navigates a deadly dual existence between Earth and a parallel fantasy realm, where he goes on missions that are broadcast back on Earth as entertainment for the masses. Fascinating premise, and the story is so much better than you could realize. Number 2, A Game of Thrones. The first book of A Song of Ice and Fire by George R.R. Martin. 5 books so far. The dude has promised 7, but will he ever pay up? I don't know. This first book came out in 1996. Epic fantasy, definitely leaning into grimdark. Goodreads score a 4.4 out of over 2.5 million ratings, and an Amazon score 4.7 out of over 72,000 ratings. People love this book. In a land where noble families vie for power, complex struggle for the Iron Throne unfolds amidst the threat of an ancient icy menace. And of course, it spun off into that show on, HBO or HBO Max or Max. Make up your mind on a name, will you guys? Number 1, you're probably not surprised. The Eye of the World. First book of The Wheel of Time, which is a 14-book series plus a prequel novel, all written by Robert Jordan. The Eye of the World came out in 1990. It is high fantasy. You might call it epic fantasy. It's got a Goodreads score of 4.2 out of over 549,000 ratings, and an Amazon score of 4.7 out of over 40,000 ratings. In a world where time is cyclical, a group of young villagers is thrust into a perilous journey as they become entwined in an ancient struggle between light and shadow. The Eye of the World is full of fantasy tropes. It makes it very approachable, very comfortable, but then it takes you down some new paths, introduces some great characters, and sucks you into a series. It got my wife to love fantasy, at least some of it. She read the whole series, and that was like unheard of for her. So this is my number 1 for kicking off a great fantasy series. All right, that's a lot of content for you here today. This is one of our longer form episodes. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope I blew up your TBR. You got some favorites on here? Put them down in the comment box. Anything you want to say about any of these that are spoiler light, don't ruin the books for people? Put your comments down. Love to hear it. And again, don't forget, like, subscribe, hit that notification bell. Also, down below in the show notes, other ways you can interact with Zach and I and talk about great books. Invitation to our Discord server, our social media links, even our email. Hope to hear from you. Hope to see you around for more content. We keep putting it out, but that's all I got for you today. Thanks for watching. We'll talk to you next time.